Sugar is poison, if you believe most of what you see on social media. Apparently, you have one sugary treat or beverage and your body instantly turns it into a fat-storing, inflammation-gathering ball of unhealthiness. But this video is going to tell you something entirely different. This video is going to tell you that you can have your sugar and you can eat it too, all whilst losing body fat, if that's what you're wanting to do. This paper is both a systematic review and meta-analysis, which means it's essentially the gold standard in the science world. Think of it like a combination of a whole bunch of smaller studies, 68 to be exact, to try and figure out the trend of what's actually going on. Plus, all 68 studies in this were completed on humans and included studies on both people with type 2 diabetes and without. Here's what the results showed. When calories are accounted for, precisely how much sugar you consume has little or no effect on weight gain. Here's the actual quote. The data suggests the change in body fat that occurs when modifying intake of sugars results from an alteration in energy balance, that's calories, rather than a physiological or metabolic consequence of monosaccharides or disaccharides, which are sugars, by the way. In the real world, you don't need to be scared of sugar. Sugar, in isolation, will not make you fat. The only thing that causes fat gain is an overconsumption of calories. So am I saying that sugar is good for you? Am I saying that sugar will get you shredded? Of course not. Like, that would be silly. There's no such thing as a healthy or unhealthy food though, because there's no single food on the planet which will give you everything you need to be healthy. There's only such a thing as a healthy or unhealthy diet and maybe lifestyle. The challenge with sugar is that often foods which contain sugar, like candy and ice cream and chocolate, are not only delicious, but extremely calorie dense. Added to that, they often tend to be low in fiber and good nutrition, which means they don't really fill us up when we eat them. And they also could be taking the place of foods that have more good nutrition in them. When we have foods that are delicious and that don't fill us up when we eat them, it makes it really easy to eat lots of them. And we can very quickly end up consuming a lot of calories. Put more simply, it's always going to be easier to overeat junk food than it is to overeat, say, chicken, rice, and vegetables, because it's tastiest and doesn't really make a dent in our hunger. So rather than avoiding sugar at all costs, if your intention is to drop a bit of weight or better understand what you're eating, you could probably consider tracking your nutrition. The same way you probably have a good indication of your income and expenses, you can do exactly the same thing with your diet. In the same way that you make decisions about what to spend your money on, you can make decisions about what you spend your calorie budget on too. Pretty quickly, you're going to realize that on any given day, some foods might be worth it for you, and some foods probably aren't going to be worth it. But knowledge is power and gives you the opportunity to make a fully informed decision before you justify any one food in the context of your day or your diet. And for those of you who are already tracking and you're looking for the nuts and bolts around exactly how much sugar is okay, listen up, because there isn't really any one size fits all answer. But also, it isn't really the right question either, because a better question would be, how many calories can you consume each day? So if you're a 100-pound, 5-foot female who works a desk job and doesn't work out, you probably don't want to slam a whole line of Tim Tams over morning tea every day, because that could well be 1/2 or even more of your total daily calorie intake needed to maintain your body weight. But maybe if you weigh, say, 300 pounds and you're a CrossFitter who works out 7 times a day, you're probably going to need a decent amount of sugar just to get enough carbohydrates and calories in to support your training performance and your goals. Now, you've probably heard of the 80-20 approach, which is the idea that 80% of your diet should be made up of whole foods and the other 20% can be made up of soul foods, you know, the ones that give you a warm and fuzzy feeling on the inside when you eat them. So what about cravings though? Surely sugar makes you crave more sugar. Again, like, not really. If I offered you a bowl of plain white sugar, do you think you'd be tempted to dive headfirst into it? Like, probably not, right? What about a platter of, let's say, donuts, ice cream, and chocolate? Now the temptation is there, right? I'm sure some of you are saying, yeah, see, sugar is addictive. But the reality is donuts and ice cream and chocolate often have as many calories from fats as they do from carbohydrates in the form of sugar. Only those gross ice creams that taste like something's gone wrong in the mixing process that have zero creaminess and no fats in them, and I can tell you now, nobody is getting addicted to those. So again, we realize the thing that has addictive qualities is not necessarily sugar in isolation. It's those super delicious and extremely calorie dense foods instead. So how do we prevent cravings? There's two schools of thought here. I've heard some coaches say that the best way to kill a craving is to starve it. But most of those coaches are all in fantastic shape and they live, breathe and sleep fitness, which means that sort of advice isn't really going to work for most people who want to actually have a life outside of the gym. It's not practical to avoid a food or foods that you really love and crave all of the time. Doing that doesn't even guarantee you the body of your dreams. It's just silly. The last time I competed on stage in a physique show, I made a point of eating ice cream every single day. Now sure, that's anecdotal, but don't forget about that meta-analysis that I mentioned before. You can have any foods as part of an overall healthy diet, even if your goal is fat loss. So rather than going cold turkey and having to use all of your willpower to restrict yourself from smashing back an entire tub of Ben & Jerry's ice cream, maybe just have some of that food every single day. Or most days, or just whenever you feel like it. That way, you don't feel so deprived of it. And you won't feel like you need to eat copious amounts of it in case you never get to see it again when you do eat it. Just make it fit within your overall calorie or macro targets and be sensible. Consume everything in moderation. And if you don't know what moderation looks like, you just need to try going through a period of tracking your nutrition so you can see the individual impact of spending a certain amount of your calorie budget on a food that has plenty of calories in it, or perhaps you want to eat to meet your satisfaction levels. Now, if you do want to go cold turkey, that's entirely up to you, but you may as well try the whole moderation thing first, right? So to summarize, sugar does not make you gain fat. The only thing that makes you gain fat is an overconsumption of calories. You can eat sugar and still lose fat, build muscle, be healthy, or whatever the goal is.